We got a good group of speakers here set to talk about all the things that you need to know leading up to race day. The point of this Gearing Up event is to not only keep the drumbeat going, keep the excitement going until June, but first and foremost to try and give you the tools, the tips, the tricks to have a successful race day, those of you that are participating in whatever event you are. And so we've got a lineup of people that we'll talk about a variety of different things, the first of which is our medical director at Grandma's Marathon. She's an orthopedic specialist here at Essentia Health. She helps us plan throughout the year how to staff the medical tent, how to make sure we keep you safe and healthy on race day, make sure that our participants have the appropriate information, the appropriate training, but really everything that she and we do from this point until June is centered around one idea, is that if she can be the person who's working the least on race day, we've done a really good job. Her goal from now until June is to keep you out of the medical tent, and so a lot of what she'll talk to you about today is centered around that goal. She does not want to see you again until we do this event next year. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Catherine McClellan.
Yes, I get to be the voice of caution today. So as you said, I'm Dr. McClellan. I work at Essentia Orthopedics and Sports Medicine, and I'm the medical director for Grandma's Marathon. As part of our commitment to health and wellness, Essentia Health is a proud sponsor of Grandma's Marathon every year. As an organization, Essentia provides orthopedic and sports medicine care for a number of community events and projects, including the high schools, area colleges and universities, as well as the medical coverage for Grandma's Marathon. We have a few of our Essentia employees here today. We're going to be back right there. We've got Joey DeVleger is one of our physical therapists, who, among other things, specializes in running and getting runners back from injury and helping them with their recovery. So please stop by his table later to talk about the services that he can provide, just in case you have any issues during your training. We also have Christina Nisler. She's an athletic trainer with abundant personal and professional experience with running, and will be available for questions during the expo time as well. Please also stop by and check out our handout on heat illness, pick up some pre-race tips for your training in order to avoid seeing us on race day. Long distance running is generally a safe and healthy activity. That said, running a marathon or a half marathon is not easy and should not be taken lightly. We take pride in our comprehensive medical response on marathon day, but we would, as Zach said, very much rather not see you. There are several things you can do as part of this time in your training to avoid having to visit one of our medical tents on race day. Running safely is about knowing your risks and finding balance. You have to train, but don't overtrain. Put in the miles, but not too many miles. Hydrate, but don't overhydrate. Eat good food, not too much, not too little. Pay attention to your body's cues as you're training. Part of your training is practicing your fueling as much as your pacing. Avoid overuse injuries like tendonitis and stress fractures by using those rest days and cross-training. Know your signs of thirst. Know how much water you need to drink in order to avoid dehydration, and practice your hydration plan every long run. Above all, make sure you have spoken with your primary care provider about your plans and assess your risk factors. Many health conditions are treated with regular exercises, but many can also place you at risk of injury or illness. If you don't have a provider, we have practices throughout the region that are accepting new patients, so please reach out if you need to get in with somebody. And while it may feel odd on a day like today to talk about heat, it is a very important factor. It is every runner's responsibility to know their risks for heat illness and take your appropriate precautions on race day. Our medical team works very closely with Grandma's Marathon and the local National Weather Service representatives to assess our risks for the day and make sure that we can run a safe event. But pay attention to pre-race communications, especially in the week leading up to the marathon, as we will be alerting you to any weather-related risk factors. Know our flag system and what you should do in response to any changes in the weather flag and the risks that produces. We can't control the weather, but we will take every precaution to make sure that we're able to run a safe and fun race. Please come by our table, to pick up a flyer about heat illness, because there's a lot that you can do in this time to help prevent that. So with all of that, without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Zach to introduce the speakers to get you a little bit more excited, but do keep in mind, we're here for you.
She's very good at keeping us grounded and making sure that we're paying attention to the important parts of race weekend, which is what this event is about, and our partnership with Essentia Health is very important to us, and we want to make sure that you all have the appropriate information, the right advice, and so if you are having any doubts about your training, please reach out to them. We can certainly point you in the right direction, but we are not the right people to be giving you those answers. We know a lot of things, but that is why we have the experts at Essentia Health to help us with that part of it. Another thing that we are not good at as a staff is getting you the right equipment to be running, which is another big part of it. We need to make sure that you have the right shoes, the right apparel, things like that for race day. And now in running, as it is in most everything else, especially in sport, there are so many specialties, there are so many options out there that I don't know if I could tell you the difference between all of them out there. And so another great partner that we have are our local running stores. Tortoise and Hare is one of them. They're our longest running partner when it comes to the three local running stores. And they are here to talk to you today about some of the options that are available in shoes and other apparel. So from Tortoise and Hare, Jim Stuckel.
We have done this for several years, and I handed this job over to my oldest son, who does a very nice job, but he's on a cultural birthday weekend. That means his fiance said we're going to the symphony and we're doing something else in the Twin Cities. So you have my wife Mary and me. She is the brains of the store, and I am the pretty face out front. So you get this today. Kind of interesting, what we've learned in 23 years of selling shoes is there are many ways. I'm going to start off with, how do you figure out which shoe is best for you? And probably a common answer to that is today, you look online. And not knowing that maybe the first 10 reviews on the new shoe comes from the company itself. So what you read might not be the perfect thing. Then again, we get most of our knowledge about shoes from our rep who comes to sell us shoes. But what's really good about most of them, you're in a partnership there, and we trust them because when they bring out their whole bag of shoes, they say, not this one, and not that one, not this one. So they can even help sort shoes for us that this shoe might not be the one that you're looking for. Second way, and I've used this before, your sister can tell you which shoes to get, or your friend or whatever. Your sister is not wearing your feet. Everybody is very different. The perfect pair of shoes might not exist out there because your feet, one from the other, are different. You know, you can't just measure one. You need to measure both of your feet. We're selling them in pairs this year, which is something new in the shoe world also. And they all do different things for your feet. So if you've got a very flat foot, you need a shoe that doesn't have too much arch, but you need something to make sure that you don't roll to the inside too far, overpronate. And it might not be an issue right now. People are very efficient, and they can be just fine in a shoe that helps you to keep from overpronating, or one that almost any shoe. It's something, somebody told me this about 2 years ago. All of the things you do in athletics, and it could be running, it can be playing basketball and jumping, it can be whatever. You don't pay for any of them at that point in time. I worked many years with Dave Kroll over at UW Superior. You get to pay for some of those things later on in life. So the more you can do now for the proper fit and proper shoes, the better off you're going to be later in life, like when you get to this stage. I'm feeling some of those things right now. And if you've got a foot issue, we can talk about those specifically over here, because in 23 years, I went with perfectly healthy feet to now I've experienced almost every problem with feet that exists. I did this for you. the public. And I'm going to answer 3 quick questions, like how long do shoes last? And I like to say about 2 weeks or so, and you should get new shoes again. But really 350 to 500 miles or so. And it can be longer. We've experienced people who've run 4 marathons and done their training in the same shoes. They get by. It works. Also, any other ideas for shoes? Well, the first person who worked with us trained people for marathons through the Arthritis Foundation, and she always said have 2 pairs of shoes going at the same time. That sounds like a greedy thing for me to say. It's like replacing your shoes every 2 weeks. But it makes sense because that EVA foam kind of rebounds if it's given a little bit of time. So if you have 2 different pairs of shoes going, that might be different brands even. You might get a little different workout for different muscles in your legs. So it's a positive again. Do you have to spend $1 million to get a good pair of shoes? Grandma's has been run with shoes from Target, New Balance cross trainers. We've experienced all of these people. Help me with something else. Tony Post, he ran the Boston Marathon. He was working for Rockport at the time, which is a leather shoe walking company. Just to show how comfortable the shoes were, he ran in his Rockport walking shoes. So you could do it in, the military does it in combat boots. You can do it in a lot of shoes, but once again, you may pay later on for all of the things that we put on our feet. So we've got something for you.
Turns out I didn't introduce myself. I'm Zach Schneider. I'm the marketing and PR director for Grandma's Marathon. If Jim is the pretty face and Mary's the brains of Tortoise and Hare, I'm neither for Grandma's Marathon. I'm just the guy who stands up and takes credit for all the work that the other staff members do throughout the year. The race is sold out, so I'm kicking my feet up after today until June. Our job's done. So thank you to everybody who signed up and who showed up. But no, it's a pretty fun job to promote this race, which has such a foundation in the community. And this year we moved into the top 10 marathons in the United States. So that was exciting news. We need to have a big race. Part of that, admittedly, was because of the Twin Cities cancellation. We weren't sure if we were going to be 10th or 11th, but in the end, we passed both Twin Cities and Houston to move into 10th. So we're hoping to hold that spot in 2024, which means we're going to need a good race weekend come June. But the race wasn't always this big, as we all know. One of the guys who deserves a lot of the credit for building it into what it is with us today. He's Scott Keenan, the founding executive director. He held that role for 37 years and knows better than anybody how much work it took to build this race into what we now know it as today. Not only our founding executive director, but he was a running coach, or is a running coach himself, close to 2 decades experience at places like St. Scholastica, at UMD, and now at Duluth East. So he is innately suited for an event like this to talk to us and get us ready for race weekend in June. So we welcome now Scott Keenan.
Yeah, first of all, I did coach, and I had the best career in my life with Grandma's Marathon for 37 years. But I've coached 18 years too, and I would say all my coaching experiences have been wonderful for me, just as rewarding, if not more, than organizing Grandma's Marathon. I want to talk a little bit about training. I'm not going to get much into it because Chris Lundstrom, he's the expert. He'll go over that. There was a great runner from Anoka, Minnesota that a lot of people never heard of. And his philosophy, in fact, he ran a 27:22 10,000 meter on the road and had the American record. He was an okay high school runner from Anoka, but his name was Mark Nenow. Mark had a philosophy on training, and it's kind of simple. So it's very simple on how to become a better runner. Is first of all, run a lot. You really have to run a lot. Mark never trained on the track much. He just ran. And his philosophy was, if you're feeling good, run hard. And if you're feeling tired, back off. That means your body's telling you have to rest a little bit. But I agree with the philosophy of when you're feeling good, show it a little bit. because in races you got to run fast. You might as well train fast sometimes in workouts when you're running, feeling good. And so Mark was a idol of mine. He was an American record holder, and a lot of people, if you want to Google Mark Nenow, you'll learn a lot about a guy that ran a lot. And he ran on hilly courses. When you felt good, run a little longer and run a little faster. So actually training is pretty simple if you want to put it together. You just got to get out there and run a lot. I just want to, that's my last coaching advice, I promise. And but in 1977, June 25th, we started Grandma's Marathon. Can anybody tell me what the entry fee was on that day? Nope. $35? Nope. 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 You only get 2 guesses over there. You can't keep guessing. How much? $10. No. It was $3. $3. And with that $3 at Grandma's Marathon, you received a free bus ride to the start, okay? And you got a finishing certificate when you completed. The race was sent to you. You had a finisher T-shirt, and you got a free beer ticket at the end. So that was $3. That's how we started it. We had 150 runners registered and 116 finishers. So it was, that's how we got going. Everybody thinks it always was big. It wasn't. In the 3rd year, we were the largest marathon in the upper Midwest, pulled ahead of the Pavel Nurmi Marathon, which was the race to run. If you were from Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, you back in the old days, you ran Pavel Nurmi Marathon. A hilly course, dirt roads, hilly course, hot. It was a challenging race, but that's the race you ran. And it's one of the oldest marathons in the United States, and it's still going on today. It's sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce of Hurley. Our budget was in 1977 was $649.51. And that's what we did to put on Grandma's Marathon. I never ran in high school, and I'm going to get a little bit on this. I was not a runner. I wanted to work as many jobs as I could and to make as much money as I wanted to buy a car eventually. And so I never ran. I started running in February of 1972. I'm old, 1972. And I was wearing green fatigues. I had calf-high combat boots. I was in Lackland Air Force Base in the Air National Guard's basic training. I had a draft number of 42, so I was going to go to Vietnam for sure in the Army. But just a month or so before that, I was chosen to be a firefighter in the Air National Guard, so I was very fortunate to that. When I went down there, I was 140 pounds, 6 foot tall. You could count every rib in my body. I was skinny, I was scared, never been on an airplane before. And so now I'm going to basic training. We have flights of 50 guys, and didn't know any of them. And so anyways, I'm down there, and the sergeants tell you have to run a mile. It was on a 3-inch sand track, and so I ran. I was scared. I ran as fast as I could. I beat the other 49 runners in our flight, and as it went on, I found out that every sergeant from every flights and squadrons had bragging rights who had the fastest runner. So I got out of KP, and I didn't have to stand in the marching and stand in parades for 4 hours in the hot sun. I could just stay in the dorm. So I'm realizing I'm getting out of good stuff now. I'm going to start running faster every day. So I did, and I ended up being the fastest runner in our squadron of 500 guys. And remember, I never ran a step before, but I was just scared, and I wasn't going to let the sergeants down. And after 7 more weeks of firefighting school in Chinook Air Force Base in Illinois, I started my running again. I went back home, and my good friend Ricky Brown, who was a runner at the high school where I went to, started talking to me and trying to get me to run. And I had some success, obviously, with basic training. So I said, yeah, I'll start it. But I didn't have any running shoes. So I went down to a store some of you may know, but most of you won't. is CZ Wilson Sporting Goods Store in Duluth. It was down on East First Street, not too far from across the street from the YMCA. And I went in there to buy a pair of running shoes. I had some money, and I went over there, and the clerk pulled me aside and set me up for a pair of Adidas ROMs. I paid $23.50 for those shoes, and the clerk ended up being a two-time champion at Grandma's Marathon, 1976 10,000 meter Olympian, Gary Bjorklund. So Gary Bjorklund sold me those first pair of running shoes. Running with Ricky Brown for a couple months, he ran fast. I didn't like running. I wanted to quit. I felt bad that I spent $23.50 a pair of running shoes because I'm going to quit. But a good coach and a dear friend who's guided me many times in my life was Steve Finkston. He coached at Duluth Central and also College St. Scholastica. And Steve Finkston organized a 3-mile race on the cinder track at UMD. And Ricky Brown convinced me to run it against my will. And I ran it, and I finished third place out of the group, and I ran 17:14 for 3 miles. Nothing great. It was 5:45 a mile, but I just started running, And Steve Finkston came up to me that moment and said, "Scott, congratulations." And I said, "Well, I came in third, but it was that reward I was receiving from Steve, like I did with the sergeants, encouraging me that I did a good job and I should do this. At that moment, in my heart, I became a runner. And that was the thing where I started getting into a little bit of that. As I went on my running, I like to run a little higher mileage, and that is one key thing too, is you just can't run 30, 40 miles a week if you're planning to run the marathon and feel like you're going to have a great success. You might finish with pain, but you're not going to have great success. But there were 3 events that led up to me to start Grandma's Marathon on that 1977. One, I ran the 1974 Pavel Nurmi Marathon. And I was scared again, never ran a marathon. I've only been running 2 years now. But I ran it. I tied for 42nd place with a guy from Indiana, Dennis McNulty. And I ran 2:51:01. And my only goal, well, you guys may know Jess Koski. He ran 2 marathons before. He was saying, we'll break 3 hours and just follow me. I said, okay, I'll follow you. But anyways, I went ahead of him because I felt good. But I loved the race in Hurley, the Pavel Nurmi Marathon, and that got me really going again. In 1975, in Buell, Minnesota, one of the greatest race directors in this area is Jim Randall from Hibbing, Minnesota. Jim Randall was an attorney from Hibbing, ended up being a state judge appointed by Governor Rudy Perpich, and he put on the 25K National Championships in Buell, Minnesota, middle of the woods. Nobody knew where it was. Runners came from all over the country, from Washington, D.C., California, Indiana, to run this. And it was all about team running. You came with a team of guys. It wasn't no individual stuff. And I ran that race for the North Shore Striders and finished 3rd for our team. And to see what Jim did, he had a budget of $1,020 to host the national championships, and to see the people that ran that race. And another Anoka runner, a great runner, Steve Hogue, won that race that day. And Steve was a 2:11 marathoner and finished in 2nd place in 1975 at Boston. The third thing that got me interested in running or starting Grandma's Marathon was in 1975, I organized a running event. It was called the Muscular Dystrophy 26-mile Runathon from 2 Harbors to Duluth. It was almost the same course that Grandma's is running today. And so we didn't have any money, but we were organizing events for charity to raise money for causes that we wanted to do. So those 3 things started clicking here. And we knew we had one of the greatest running courses in the country on the North Shore. So the idea was starting to click in my mind that we need to put on a marathon. Now, for good or bad, I always felt like I wanted to be in charge of things. And a lot of people might think that's the bad. I'll go with that, I agree. But so I put myself on the ballot to be president of the North Shore Striders in 1973. And the club gets voting. We had all these, well, for some reason I won, and I became president of the North Shore Striders. And I did that to 1979. So in 1976, now we're coming to this idea that we're going to organize a marathon. And I'm going to read a little bit. By the way, I wrote a book, it's if you haven't noticed, but I'm going to read a little bit here because I think it'll tell it best. On Sunday, August 29th, 1976, Bob Schneider organized the inaugural Billings Park 10K road race in Superior, Wisconsin. The course was described as out and back with rolling hills through residential and wooden portions of the park. The roadway was 50% pavement and 50% dirt. The entry fee was 50 cents. The North Shore Striders hosted their annual club meeting afterwards in the picnic area overlooking the scenic inlet of the St. Louis River. There was a dozen or more striders at the meeting to discuss a plan to organize the United States sanctioned marathon along the shores of Lake Superior on Highway 61. This was the only agenda item. The starting line would be outside of Two Harbors, and the race would finish in the industrial waterfront area known as Canoe Park. This is the largest endeavor of the club had ever taken on, and I need consensus from all the active members. The date that would fit best in our summer racing schedule was June 25th, 1977. I had confidence we could put together a quality race since we had hosted the annual Musker Dystrophy 26-mile runathon. The course would be almost identical. After enjoying a post-race celebration and a little discussion, club members voted unanimously to support hosting the marathon. The North Shore Striders had $23.50 in our club checkbook. I would be the race director, and my first responsibility was to put the finances together. Our other races were always on a shoestring budget. We just needed the bare essentials, nothing fancy. Road racing was in its infancy. Runners had low expectation. They just wanted an accurately measured course and not get hit by a car. We had less than 10 months to pull this together. I needed a budget to finalize the race course, find a major sponsor, market the race, and find a team of volunteers. It was a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. I was ready for the challenge, but to be honest, I was scared to death. And so that's kind of like how the race got started. I'm wrapping up, I promise. I'm gonna go to a little bit more here because there's a lot of heroes at Grandma's Marathon, if it was Jim Randall and others. But with that $649.51 budget, I approached many high-profile local businesses attempting to convince them to sponsor the marathon. We had no business plan, no marketing plan. Everything was based on trust. I was rejected every time. People who know me, most would agree that I'm a little headstrong and stubborn. I don't give up easy. I scheduled a meeting with Mickey Palucci and Andy Borg at the properties of their newly opened Grandma's Saloon and Deli, which is a stone's throw away from the airlift bridge. It was right where we wanted to finish the race. My strategy changed slightly at this meeting. I had just turned 23 years old, and I was skinny, fast-talking, and gaunt-looking. I felt it was important to bring a fellow strider with me. A more professional approach was needed. His name was George Fink, a 37-year-old sales manager at Northwestern Bell. He fit the bill. George was a member of the University of Minnesota track and field team in 1956 and 1957. He had a warm personality and a smile that made you want to be his friend. I would have done almost anything to get this deal finalized, even if it meant giving them a title sponsorship for $600. George and I made the deal that beautiful Saturday afternoon. We received our asking price of $600, and agreed to finish at the back door of the saloon. There was no signed contract or agreement. All four of us shook hands. So that's pretty much how we got going on Infancy. One of the proudest things I felt like I was a big part of at Grandma's Marathon was that we hosted 9 United States National Championships at Grandma's Marathon. And it was a big deal. When I started Grandma's Marathon, 1977, my philosophy was to have the best runners that I could get here. And I convinced Gary Bjorklund. I privately raised $200 through businesses to get Gary Bjorklund to run his first marathon. Born in Duluth, grew up in Twig, went to Proctor High School, and Gary came and won the race in 2:21:54 on the hottest day you could ever imagine in Duluth. Started the race at 11 o'clock in the morning, but from that day on, we brought runners from England, over 50 different countries, hosted 9 United States National Championships, either in a half marathon or the marathon. And that was so important for me to bring runners around the world to Grandma's, have our own Special Olympics every year at Grandma's Marathon. Grandma's Marathon is a citizen race, but be honest, it's also an elite race that we can showcase our city, our race, our friends, our volunteers, our runners to the world. And that was the philosophy of mine going in from day one. And I, as I said in my book, people may disagree with me, but I never wavered. I just moved on. I just walked away from their thoughts and did the right thing. Thank you very much.
We certainly owe a lot to Scott as an organization, not the least of which is that culture that he created. Certainly things have changed in the almost 50 years since 1977. The way that we do business, we have contracts that are signed now, but the culture of that small town charm has stuck with us, and it's always fun to go to other big marathons, running conferences around the country, and compare how Grandma's Marathon is run still today to other big marathons around the country. We are very different, and a lot of that is because of who we are, where we are, and the culture that Scott and the staff in the early days instilled. And so things are different, but we take a lot of pride in continuing some of that tradition. We're going to be giving away, after our last speaker here, one of Scott's books. Scott is adamant that every piece of information that I ever need to know as the marketing and PR director of Grandma's Marathon is in that book. He's made me read it several times instead of answering some questions that I've had for him. So I can vouch that it's a very good read. If you haven't read it, he's got some copies for sale if you don't win one or haven't read it already. So thanks very much to him for being here. Couple housekeeping items. If you haven't entered the raffle yet, you can still do that. We're going to draw the winners of our items after our final speaker here. We just need your name and email address. We'll draw all of those after our last speaker here. So you've still got some time to enter. Our official training group, Tony Stensland, is here. So after the event here, he's not going to be speaking formally, but Tony Stensland, who's leading our official training group, is here to answer any questions that you might have, because that is the whole point, to give you options to create that community for yourself, give you accountability partners, give you some friends, some people to run with on those cold mornings as we get closer and closer to June. So our last guest speaker this morning is Chris Lundstrom. He is the head coach of a group called the Minnesota Distance Elite, which is a Twin Cities-based team formerly known as Team USA Minnesota. They train year-round. Some of the best distance runners in the nation are part of this team. They'll have several athletes competing next month at the Olympic trials in Florida. I had a fun research project last week. We have 147 of the athletes that are competing in the trials for the men and the women have run in Duluth before. So we are hoping very much to have a Grandma's Marathon connection to at least one of our future Olympians. We'll see how the race goes, and I know he's got several people that he'll be keeping an eye on next month in Orlando. Chris has been the head coach of Minnesota Distance Elite since 2016. He Two has coached for close to 2 decades, same as Scott, at varying levels, and himself was a heavily decorated runner, both at Stanford and post-collegiately. So we're very lucky to have him both coaching our Minnesota distance elite athletes and with us this morning. So Chris Lundstrom.
Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm going to give you a little bit of history, not as much. I can't do that, but I do have a long history with this event and a real connection with it going back to when I was a kid. So I want to touch on that a little bit and hopefully give you guys a few gems or things to think about as you're preparing for this year's event. But I coach the Minnesota Distance Elite team. I also every spring teach a marathon training class at the University of Minnesota, where it's largely first-time marathoners coming out and doing their first race. And so one of the things I love about coming to Grandma's Marathon now is I can go out and watch, and I know a lot of the people up front who are competing to win the race, and I can stay out there for hours and continue to see people who took the class many years ago, or I coached at different points. So it's just a really special event. But like I said, I've been aware of Grandma's since I was a little kid. My grandparents actually lived about 45 minutes west of here, near the town of Floodwood on a farm. And I remember as a small kid seeing the TV coverage of Grandma's, listening to it on the radio, and all of that stuff. And so it turned out I really enjoyed running myself, so I started running high school track and cross country. And in high school, one of my teammates had the great idea that we would sign up for the Gary Bjorklund Half Marathon. So we got the entry forms, these strange paper forms that you used to have to fill out, and mailed it in the first day you could, and waited. And we waited and waited, and eventually we got this little postcard in the mail that said, you have an entry into the Gary Bjorklund Half Marathon, and here's your number, and don't lose this piece of paper or you're not going to be able to pick up your race number. So we held on to that, and anyway, I was 15 years old and ran my first half marathon, had no idea what I was doing. I was running mile and 2 mile on the track, but I loved it immediately. Just the energy, being a part of something larger, all these thousands of people out doing the same thing together at different levels. And it was truly an adventure. Like I said, I did not know what I was doing, but that's kind of my first point is, every time out is going to be a little bit different, and you really just have to embrace that adventure and, know that each time it's going to give you something special and something different. Sometimes some new challenges that maybe you don't anticipate, sometimes a breakthrough to a level that you didn't know you could get to. But anyway, the love of road running was definitely cemented there in that first half marathon. Went off to college, was not a super great experience. I won't get too into my not so decorated collegiate career, but I finished up and kind of thought, well, I gave it a good go. So much for my running career, but it kind of pulls you back out. Started just going out at night, running a few miles, started running with a local club where I was living, and next thing you know, I'm running these road races. Ran a half marathon. This is now a couple years after college, and had a great half marathon. Again, I loved that distance. So a couple of the guys on the club said, hey, you should train for a marathon. And, I was living in California, but naturally I thought, marathon, I got to go run Grandma's. So I got signed up, and I had, had some really good races by then, and was actually able to be a part of the elite field or the professional field, whatever you want to call it. So first marathon, I'm at the start line. I kind of knew what I could target for a pace. And I had been cautioned enough not to go out too fast and all that stuff. So I set out at my pace, and the lead pack raced away faster than I was planning to run. So I was kind of by myself from mile 2, 3. I'm looking around, there's nobody real close in front of me. Looking back, there's nobody very close there. I ran the first 16 miles entirely by myself. And I definitely had some thoughts out there about my life choices and why I had gone down this questionable path. But, I kind of just stayed with my plan. And I guess that's the other point is to really, know what your purpose is for that day and what you're capable of and your plan, and stick to that, whether that's in your training runs or on race day. And so eventually some people started to come back to me, caught some people and had not the best race ever, but I remember coming around and finally seeing the finish line and, the tears coming to my eyes. And I am not a very emotional person generally, but I think I was just so happy to see that finish line. And despite the fact that I'd been running for a long time by then, 8-10 years of competitive running, it was an incredible sense of accomplishment just to finish. Again, super meaningful. Continue to come back to Grandma's, either for the half or the full, for many, many years. Always had the dream of taking the win at Grandma's. Never got it myself. I think I was second in the half and maybe 10th or so in the marathon. But I started getting into coaching and had some guys that ran, 2:13, 2:14 up here, placed pretty well. And eventually got the job coaching Minnesota Distance Elite, the team that I had run for, which was also a dream come true. We always are sending people up here to Grandma's. And one kind of fun story from that is got an email from this girl who was finishing up for Division II runner, wanted a chance to join the team. She said, my times really aren't what you guys probably would consider, but I would love to just have a chance to train with you. And she was living out in South Dakota. I said, sure, you can come out and train with us. And she said, well, I'm going to be back. My dad lives in Minneapolis, so I'm going to be back. Can I come out for a couple runs? Sure, she comes out and does a couple runs. She's like, oh, she seems really like she could be a great competitor. And then next thing I know, she's moved to Minneapolis, Twin Cities, and she's coming every day. And she can't quite keep up, but she's gradually getting there. And fast forward a little bit, and this is Dakota Lindworm, who's now won the marathon here twice, is currently training for the Olympic trials, along with a number of our other athletes. And now she is the athlete on our team who other athletes come out and say, I can't quite keep up with Dakota yet, but, if I can just keep at it. That kind of brings me to one of the other points that I wanted to make, which is about consistency in training. And this is something I learned from my college days too, which is no single workout or session is going to make you a great athlete. It's putting in solid work consistently over time. So you've got months still to train. Maybe you're going to go home and feel really fired up and say, I got to really go crush it this week. Nope, you just need to do a little more than you've done previously and continue to build each week. Don't overdo anything too much. And the body gradually transforms through time and repeated stress and recovery. So make sure you're getting a good balance there of providing, some good training sessions for yourself, gradually increasing that mileage, but taking plenty of recovery as well. Your medical director had a great point. She said, pay attention to your body. And I think that's another point that I wanted to make is always be tuned in to how you're feeling on a particular day, on a particular session. This is different from listen to your body. I'm not sure if it was might have been Don Cardong, you might know Scott Keenan, who said, if I listened to my body, all I would do is sit on the couch and eat ice cream or something like that. So we're not talking about listening to your body like, oh, I'm tired, I'm going to stop. We're talking about paying attention to how you're feeling, tuning into that. If you're feeling tense, relaxing. If you're feeling slightly fatigued, make note of it. See how you're feeling the next day, and pay attention to it over time. And what you're going to find is gradually you're running faster paces with the same effort, and you can see this positive trend that you're building over time. I guess the last point I wanted to kind of leave you guys with is that, people talk a lot about how hard running is. And there's some truth to that. Certainly when you start out in the morning on a run, it's probably more comfortable to sit in your house and drink another cup of coffee or whatever else. But when we go out and get those first few steps in, something starts to happen, and it does actually start to feel good, and you got to pay attention to that as well, and continue to build from that. So that sense of this is a little bit tiring, this is a little bit uncomfortable, that's actually a positive thing. So kind of reframing your relationship with what we think of as discomfort or things that are hard. If you know that actually the point of going out and training is to experience a little bit of that, as Scott said, if you're feeling good, to push a little bit and know that actually this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to experience this feeling where I'm getting a little bit out of breath, where my legs are getting a little bit tired, and knowing that with rest and recovery, you're actually going to get stronger, and then that same effort is going to be considerably easier. Is it ever easy to go out and run 26 miles or even 13 miles or even a 5K if you run hard? No, it's not supposed to be easy, but it can be a very fulfilling and beautiful thing for sure. So encourage you to kind of embrace that feeling of challenge that you're undergoing through training. Know that that's really the point of what you're doing. You're making yourself stronger with each hard effort that you're putting in out there. Give yourself the recovery, and really enjoy the process as you're preparing. So we have, again, 7 athletes training for the Olympic trials down in Orlando. That's now 3 weeks from today. So I'll be around afterwards if anybody wants to talk training or wants to know how to kind of tune in and follow those athletes, those Minnesota athletes, as they take a crack at the 2024 Olympic team. But I really appreciate you all having me today, and wish you the best of luck with your training and other endeavors. So thanks much.